So we're live, microphone's on, good. So I can't tell on the screen if the video guys can see this, but this is just off of Blackboard, those team guideline presentations. I wanna go back through those. So I was just on Blackboard here, and hit the team and you had to download it and open it, okay? So this stuff is already out on Blackboard, I guess, and we've discussed it once, but we're getting to the point now where we need to really get some traction going on these team presentations. So let's just kind of go through this again. I think you guys are teamed up, right? I think, Donnie, let's put Frank on your group, just since Taylor's not here today, and you guys can you can just bring him up. So I know none of you guys are very far along, but let's kind of walk through because you'll get some time today in class. Hopefully you can start moving that project along a little bit. So visual aids, so PowerPoints, embedded YouTube videos, something to make it a little more graphical would be great. There's no minimum or maximum length. Again, we're doing these presentations not to try to create a bunch of extra work, but try to get you to be interested in some concept of business that you can spend a little bit more time with the content, and then also present that content to the group so that we're getting information on at least a few subjects a little bit more deep and a little bit more often. So yeah.
Ideally, if you was to envision it, what would you think time frame? Just give us, if you would, just give us when you.
Well, so here's how I would do the time is I would first start with the concept that you want to try to portray.
Yes.
Okay, and so let's say you take leadership. Well, clearly you could be up here for 4 hours teaching leadership. So if you take a topic like leadership, then I got to drill into a little bit deeper. What piece of leadership do I want to do? Because I don't want to be up here for 4 hours. Okay. So once you narrow in on that concept, then the thing I would tell you to do is think about your audience. And even though now I really want to do this concept, I probably need to tell them a little about that and that to give them context. Okay?
Yes.
So now, once you have that figured out, and that, like, you literally could figure that out today when we meet as a team today. You can figure out what topics you're interested in, and begin to figure out how what piece of that topic you want to present on. So once you have that concept and then the context that you want to put it in, your time will then be almost dictated by the transitions. What people don't do well in presentations is they don't do an introduction, they don't do a summation, and their transitions are read, okay, I'm done, Donnie, and then Donnie goes, read, you know what I mean? So if you really do a presentation well, some of that time is spent setting up what Donnie's gonna talk about, closing down what you're done talking about, right?
Okay.
And so the length thing ends up kind of taking care of itself. I've seen good ones, as short as, 5 to 7 minutes, but I've seen really good ones that are 15 minutes too. So the reason I want to take time off the table is what I don't want you to do is stand up here and give us a bunch of fluff because you had to get to 8 minutes and you didn't have 8 minutes of content.
Yeah, I understand. I just really wanted what your opinion was on what would be a good.
If you focus on giving us a truly good message,
Yes.
the length will take care of itself. Okay?
Just pick a topic, a good concept, and
Yeah, that you're interested. Hopefully, something you're interested in, so you can actually dig into a little bit. You don't mind going back, do a little bit more reading on it.
Yes.
And so then we'll keep moving here. Must apply book concepts to your content. So what I don't want either though is an opinion piece. Okay, so I don't want your presentation to be just my ideas and only. You can have some of your opinion in there, but it ought to be as context surrounding these book concepts. And when I say book concepts, it means you should use some of that actual terminology. Okay, and again, what's that number? It kind of depends on how many pieces you're getting into. You know what I mean? But it's probably 3 to 5 in my mind. That you ought to have, where as the audience sit here and goes, oh, that came out of the book. Oh, that came out of the book. Okay. We talked about 2 different styles: a traditional presentation, like I do, where you're just clicking through the slides. Maybe you have an embedded YouTube, and that's about it. That type of presentation would probably require a little bit more content than if you want to do something creative like a talk show or a game show or something like that. You wouldn't have to cover quite as much content because you're spending more time on the presentation. okay? Everybody must talk. Your dress should match your theme, so if I'm doing a fairly traditional presentation, I should probably dress fairly traditional, okay? Think about the audience and how can we engage them, okay? At a bare minimum, you should have that's all I have for you guys today. What kind of questions can we answer for you about our presentation? At a minimum, you should have that. But along the way, you might have hey, have you guys ever had this happen to you? Or does anyone have a story, you know? And as good audience members, and if this class doesn't do it, I'll make sure I get involved. You know, we'll give you some feedback, so you're not just sitting up here going, what you guys make me do, which is part of the reason I'm making you do a presentation. So you get on the other side of the table a little bit and figure out, ooh, he's gotta be up there for 2.5 hours.
So
Okay.
we get paid is what he's telling me.
I touched on this, smooth transitions, you know, don't be clumsy. What happens is, if you do a presentation where Frank's gonna do the first 4 slides in this piece, and Donnie's gonna do this piece, and Taylor's gonna do that piece, and you never really communicate about it, your slides look different than everybody else's slides, and the transitions aren't clear, and it's stumbly, and you lose your audience is what happens. So take some time. I mean, you should actually present it together sometime. You know, and I know it's tough to get everybody's schedules together, but that's why I'm trying to give you a lot of time, and this has been on the syllabus from day one. So, and then good conclusions I touched on. Don't just go read. Yeah, that's all I got. Like, we should know when to clap, right? Because you should have set us all up with a recap, a summary of what we covered today, etc. All right. So this document is out there. What other questions come up? I know you guys. Are you guys anywhere on finding your topic? I'm sure Donnie and you guys aren't.
We are.
You know your topic? Okay, good. Because what I'd like to do, next week we're off, so because we're doing just a test next week, I'll do a video lecture. The following week though, let's be prepared to show a rough outline. When I say a rough outline, it literally can be like, you know, point 1 is gonna be this, introduction, point 2, you know, etc. And then we can share that with teammates, classmates, and get just a rough review of, you know, I think it's missing this, or did you think about putting that in there, or this would be a cool story. Okay.
I do have one brief concern though, so I'm just gonna vocalize it. Say Donnie gets sick for 3 weeks.
Yeah.
And I can't get a hold of Donnie.
Yeah.
And Taylor's the other guy, I think, or
Yeah.
whatever it is, so
Yeah.
he's not showing up either.
Yeah.
So am I gonna be penalized for doing 100% of my work and him being unable to fully support?
I've never had that happen.
Okay.
So I think that
I'm not projecting that on you at all. You know what I mean? So I'm just saying maybe,
yeah, no, I don't think that'll happen.
okay.
One, because we're making enough in-class time available.
Okay.
But if that were to get to the case where you feel like it's log jamming, just let me know. You know, and you know, I'm not gonna throw you under the bus. I'm just gonna be a little more assertive in how I manage your guys' team. You know what I mean?
No, I'm not projecting that. I'm not saying.
Yeah, no, I get it.
I just-
Yeah, it's a legitimate concern.
I'm gonna be second this week.
That's part of the value of having to work with a team though too, is, you know.
At least haven't had 12 weeks to build a relationship, kind of what
Yeah.
I'm like, you know what I mean? That's,
I'll
Yeah.
make a time on your word.
Okay,
I don't have a microphone. Would you be able to do that?
any other, questions on this?
That's easy.
Okay. So this document's out there. If you have questions, just email me. And again, the online people, I'm sure that's not showing up great on my screen, but
Because if I make a presentation, it's like the same thing as Word, it's just Microsoft.
I'm gonna get this door. We got that door. So we're gonna jump right into chapter 11. Marcus and Frank need to leave early today. So what we're gonna try to do is get 11 done and get time for you guys to talk as a team before you two have to go. And then I'll lecture on 12, and then you guys can get out of here. So I'm sure.
I'm gonna have to get out of here a little early too.
Okay.
'Cause I have a doctor's appointment.
Okay, well, I'm sure we'll get this wrapped up as best we can. And if it ends up where I need to lecture 12 to nobody, and you guys just watch it, we can talk about that too. So we'll plan on for sure getting 11 done and getting some team time together. Sound good? Okay, so we touched on this earlier in the class. These 2 chapters are not the sexiest chapters that we've covered, but you know, they are important. And of course, if anyone's thinking of getting into human resources, I've already offended them, right? 'Cause
I'm
they're
at
like,
home right now.
sexy.
What's
is
that?
that
I'm in human resources.
are you? Yeah. So I think it's one of those things that people either have a passion and interest in or they don't. But yet, super critical, obviously, because your people, are your greatest resource. So, we'll talk about some of this information here. I'm gonna go through pretty quick through these slides because there's a bunch that I don't think are as important as others. But so human resource management, just this concept of we have employees, we need a department, a function of our business to be looking out for our employees, preparing them, making sure we have enough employees, and that whole responsibility is, I think, becoming more and more important throughout this decade, next decade. And I think a lot of that is because we're all looking for the same talent, and the ability to attract and retain and develop employees is just more and more important all the time. Whereas I think back in the day, it was, we had 2 dudes for every job we had, so let's burn him up, send him on out, and get the other one, so. It's kind of ironic because we're gonna do the chapter 12 is going to be on labor law and unions, and it's almost like that should have come first, because it's kind of, I think, preceding this concept of human resource management. So what are they doing? Here's a graph. It probably didn't show up great on the TV, but they're doing a lot of stuff. When you guys think of human resources, what are some of the areas that come to your mind with regards to duties?
Hiring and firing.
Okay, hiring and firing. What else?
Pay stubs.
Okay, so like actually processing a payroll, making sure people get paid. No one likes to have their pay messed up, right? I mean, you want to talk about first way to alienate an employee, man, is if you mess their pay up, they just go through the roof.
On the clock issues like sexual harassment, things
Okay.
like that. Those
Yeah,
things.
civility, sexual harassment, discrimination. Okay, so a lot of those.
Do customer service.
No, human resources probably won't do customer service. I mean, their customers are really the employees.
Do you have
Purchasing.
benefits?
What's that? Yeah, benefits. Yeah, so we'll talk about those too.
Just like vacation days and PTO days and stuff.
Yep, exactly, and we'll talk about why those are becoming more and more important. One thing we didn't talk about though too, that before I skip past that slide, I'm sure it'll come up here, is training as well. Subaru and Wabash and Caterpillar, what they're doing for you guys through a program like this is pretty cutting edge. There's not a lot of companies that are ponying up real cash to go send people to training, and we'll talk more about that as we get into it. Talent is scarce, so we got to make sure we're recruiting them. We've got the expansion into global markets, so even though maybe we have fewer talented people, or talented is maybe not the right word, skilled in the skills that we need and want to use here in the US, some of those jobs are being filled now globally, internationally. So it's kind of a double-edged sword. So as a human resource person, you can say, well, I have more people to choose from now because I could actually get some of these people to do this work outside of the United States. But then you also have to have mechanisms for sifting through and finding those people and which ones are right and screening those people and et cetera. So it's kind of a double-edged sword. But that the shifting demographics, obviously the age of our baby boomers and those sorts of things are all things that are on the minds of human resource managers.
So would that deal with the concept, I just read not too long ago how Ford is getting ready to lay off like a huge amount of employees because of Trump's bill that passed for,
I don't know. I haven't read that, but that would be surprising because Trump has been typically a protectionist.
Yeah, he's protectionist, but I think more of the making companies that left the United States come back into the United States is more or less what I'm talking about.
So
That
Ford would have to
inform-
lay people off in Mexico or something?
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
I got
right.
you. Okay, yeah, that would make more sense because
Wow.
Trump's been pretty hard at
Mhm.
trying to keep jobs here.
But they're
And-
getting ready to lay off a bunch of people that are in different
Countries.
because of the
Yeah.
bill that passed.
Yeah, and that could be happening, and so that you'll see a textbook term called reshoring, because you've heard of offshoring. Offshoring is the sending of jobs to another country. reshoring is bringing them back. I think some people call it nearshoring, but you're seeing more and more of that happen. I think because of successes like Subaru and Toyota and other non-union shops are having some success at running a traditional manufacturing facility without the extra cost layer of a union. And I think other places are going, okay, well, if they can do it, then we can do it. And then, of course, combining with the fact that, not so much in China yet, but in Mexico, the standard of living in those manufacturing areas in Mexico have increased enough that you're starting to have to pay them more than when you first moved there. China still is different. China will always be different because they're communist, and they, that's a whole different political structure.
So now will it affect Subaru, since it's technically not a U.S. company, where like they're from the outside coming in, or?
No, I don't think so.
We'll keep all jobs here.
Yeah. So Subaru, and like I said, Toyota are more cutting edge because they figured out a way to get in here, create a manufacturing environment without the burden, maybe isn't the right word, but the cost of a really strong union. And the union got the auto workers union. Has been tough. And we're gonna get into this in the next slide, but I totally get they're advocating for their employees and that sort of thing, but they were a major component to General Motors and Chrysler and Ford struggling. And so they've had to make big concessions, not just the auto workers, but a lot of unions have had to make large concessions, and that's allowing those corporations to be a little bit more financially healthy. And I think that's what you're seeing, is why somebody might be able to move back in here. Yeah.
Another thing I'd like to think too, as a human race, we're becoming more conscious of what happens when we send those jobs overseas.
Yeah.
It takes money out of our pocket, it helps build another economy, but it's burdening our system. I think that we're just becoming more of the invisible hand aspect. We have this plethora of jobs, communities are healthy, they're doing well. When we're sending all to Mexico to get made for cents on the dollar, it's just, it's killing us.
I would, I might disagree with you a little bit from this standpoint. Well, first of all, I think international trade is extremely complex, and I'm not even sure where I stand on protectionism versus open doors, wide open, and completely free trade. I know in my mind I struggle with China because it's not apples to apples, because they're communist. So because they're communists, they can't really force their people to live in bad conditions, and we really can't do that here. So I think that's leaving that off the table. If you just say Mexico, for instance, I struggle with, I tend to lean towards free trade as open and as easy as possible because it builds competition. But it's super complex, because I totally get what you're saying. If we protect some jobs, which is what protectionism is we create some artificial barriers to keep jobs here. There is some value in that in the definite short run. People feel good about it, more people are working, they're working at jobs that are more meaningful, etc. But that also means that whatever artificial layer I put in there, we gotta pay for it through the higher costs. Whether it be our cars, our televisions, or whatever, are gonna cost more. And that doesn't sit well with me either, you know what I mean? So, super complex stuff, but important stuff. So I think I get a little impatient when people are one extreme or the other, because there's always trade-offs, Civil Rights Act, 1964, again, in some ways it seems like that was just, 64 is not that long ago. In other ways, in my mind, it does seem like a long ago. But obviously, if you're in human resources and doing any sort of hiring, you have to be very aware of discrimination and equal opportunity. Another somewhat controversial idea is affirmative action. Affirmative action is the concept of making special arrangements to include a typically underrepresented group into your business, school, whatever. So one of the ones that got some of the most publicity was the University of Michigan was very publicly pro affirmative action. So they were basically letting in female and minorities into University of Michigan that met a different standard than every other University of Michigan not every other, but the dominant white male, student. And for some people, that's like so wrong, and it just makes people angry, and it's like, well, that's not fair, and etc. And for other people, they're saying, look, they need that boost because they've been discriminated for so long, and so it can be a very polarizing topic, affirmative action. Do you guys have thoughts? Have you had any experience with affirmative action?
I like the thought of it actually, just because it does seem like minorities are so suppressed, you know what I mean? I talked to a kid the other day, he's 23, none of his family's graduated, and about to make him full-time, it's just like, and that's a common thing, he said, no one in my family's ever graduated.
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to say, we should be mistreated as being Caucasian, but I do think that we owe something.
Yeah.
It's just, I think there's definitely a debt due, I think.
I
Yeah.
disagree with it because
Me
I
too.
feel like that regardless of what race you are, I feel like that with affirmative action, let's say you're more qualified, but just because you're a white male, I'm gonna take the opportunity away and give it to you just because of a past. I do think what we did in the past was wrong, I'm not disagreeing with that, but I feel like this takes away opportunity for someone who is more qualified.
Mm-hmm.
And
So you-
regardless of what race, color, anything that
Yeah.
stands
So
out.
it's kind of bad business almost, because if I'm in the
Exactly.
business to make money, I need the most talented people
Yeah.
in the organization. That's definitely an opinion. Donnie, what were your thoughts on?
Yeah, because like I know that every single person in my class, graduating class that applied to Purdue, did not get accepted.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, I'm with them, I disagree because you can have, or let's just say there's two white males, one grew up in like a rich family and stuff and everything, and the one has like, everybody has equal opportunity, it's just that person had like a head start because they have the money, the wealth to actually go
Yeah.
to do those things, but everybody has, they have the motivation, they can put their mindset to anything.
That's considered white privilege if you have the head start, that's
Yeah.
what we're talking about. I mean, if it was an even till, everybody came from a two-parent home, and all their parents have graduated, and they all went to college, it's a very touchy
Well, I
subject.
disagree because.
Oh, it is, for
Right,
sure.
so- And it's
Yeah.
a very touchy subject.
And
That's
there
what it's
isn't,
touching.
we're not gonna solve it today, but we can definitely have a good debate about it, yeah.
Certainly.
It's you,
Well, I think, predominantly white males come from a two-parent, more solid income home than minorities, but there's minorities that come from that household and vice versa, so I think
Yeah.
it should be strictly on
well, I think that,
talent and education.
let's throw a couple other, ingredients into there. So if you look at, why would Michigan want to do that? Okay,
Because
what's
their
in it for them?
demographic.
Yeah, but what's in it for them? Why would Michigan, they wanna keep their academics as high as possible, why would they lower their standards slightly for some of these people? What would be in it for them?
My first thought's athletics almost. I
Well,
mean,
no, it's
that's
not the
gone
athletic
too
department.
far away from the
That's-
actual.
That's not the athletic department.
Has
In
nothing to do
this
with
case, it was
athletics.
actually, I think the law department was the first one to do it.
More of a draw to actually go to the school then.
Okay, so maybe we're tapping into a different clientele that,
Well,
but they're rejecting, Michigan's probably rejecting
Funding.
75% of their applicants. So they have plenty of applicants.
I mean,
Government
that's-
assistance, maybe government assistance
No,
or
no,
something.
no money that way.
I mean,
What's the advantage, so what is the advantage of not having all white males working at Subaru?
Who you attract.
Okay, but under your idea is, there isn't, I'm trying to get guests to think about, is there any value in having a diverse workforce?
Certainly,
Yeah.
different ideas, different concept, different ways of thinking.
Yeah,
But I'm not putting the pieces together on what Michigan would want. I guess I try to find follow the money scheme, I guess is what
Yeah.
I always try to do.
so here's where Michigan came out. So they did this a long time ago, and they were one of the hot, well before other people have, mostly because they were willing to publicly talk about it. But, and again, I'm not an expert on this, but it is something I'm interested in, I've done a little bit of reading on. There is scientifically proven this white privilege concept, okay, and we're gonna show it in just a second, just in the gender gap, just male-female, there's a gap. What Michigan was saying is, they're saying, we have this bar, and not everybody can get to that bar because of a lot of things you've talked about. They don't get the testing prep, they didn't come from the same school system, they didn't have the support at home. Does that mean they're not as good a student? Or does that mean they can't perform as well on a standardized test to get into my school? Right? So they're putting so much emphasis on testing, and the school grades, and they're saying maybe that's not the way, and so they back this off. Fast forward, I don't know exactly the number of years, but they've tracked now for like 10 years, those graduates in the workplace are as equally successful as any other graduate that they've put out financially and involved in community and all that stuff. So they are a typical Michigan graduate. But they never would have gotten into Michigan without an affirmative action program. And I get Marcus's point, he's saying, but that also means that there's 10 other guys who should have gotten into Michigan too, who now can't say that they're Michigan graduates, right? So I get that side of it too, you know? So it's complex, I think, and where I think Marcus is going at is, it starts to feel like reverse discrimination. Where now all of a sudden, you're not allowed to have the opportunity because we got too many of them like you, you know? And I don't think that necessarily everybody's advocating for that, but I see how people can interpret affirmative action as being that. I mean, it's why it's on the same slide, right? Well, I appreciate you guys sharing your opinions and being respectful of the difference in opinions. I think, you know, I lean a little bit towards affirmative action. It's a bad analogy, but the analogy that I think of too is like, I'm a big football guy, and so like concussions are all over the radar, and you know, being superly investigated and etc. And as a old school football guy, it's easier for me to say, man, that's crazy. That's just way too much. We've swung way too far. As an old school football guy, I can also say, yeah, but we spent too long this way either. And even though right now we might have swung this far this way, I think we'll come back some eventually to a more middle ground. And I think to a certain extent, that's my feeling or acceptance of affirmative action is, yeah, it didn't feel quite right, but probably is necessary for a little while to try to even some of the playing field. And then eventually we won't even need those sort of programs because we will have figured out the real situation. So that's my 2 cents. Again, civil rights, and especially with regards to hiring, we have to accommodate those with disabilities. The kind of term to think about with disabilities is a reasonable accommodation. So the expectation of a business is, if I can make a reasonable accommodation and they can still perform the work, I need to consider them as a part of hiring. Or if they were to become injured, you know, so I saw a gal at Target who clearly had some sort of muscular problem, and she was working as a cashier, but she had a stool there. And so that she could sit down. She didn't sit down all the time, but she could sit down when she needed to. That's a reasonable accommodation. Okay, that's the biggest thing to think about with here. And again, if you don't have disabled people in your family, a lot of us don't even think about disabilities. Mm-hmm. You know, you're starting your own business or whatever. Like this old building I was in with my nonprofit, you know, I didn't even think about disability until I donated some time for people to come in. I'm like, oh, we need a ramp, you know. So age discrimination, I've probably been guilty of this at being somewhat overly intentional hiring younger people. And in fact, the research, a lot of the things that I thought I knew about older employees, I was not accurate, so I was ill-informed. But clearly we need to not be discriminating based on age. You guys are pretty young, so you have to worry about that right now. Again, know the laws. If you're gonna spend time in HR, I mean, you'll get time figuring that out. So what's the planning process? A lot of it's not rocket science, right? You have to begin to figure out, what does our business, what's it need now? What's it gonna need in the future? But also, what does the current labor market look like? So you're doing a lot of things. You're preparing the job descriptions, the job analysis, okay, and then what are the specs? Think of what are the qualifications somebody needs. So you need to know that across not just your jobs currently, but then what you think you're going to grow into. Hey, right now we have 5 techs, but in 5 years we're gonna need 10 techs, or we're gonna need 0 techs. We're gonna go more automated. You know, those sort of things is what HR is trying to understand. Anybody had a job, went into a job that had a very poor job description, that you got into the job and you were like, this is not at all what they said it was gonna be like. those can be really frustrating. You know, so like in my trucking world, I was way over the top at being very conservative and very accurate with the description of the job, because these people were uprooting their lives. They were going to go from a factory job to living in a truck with their wife for 3 weeks out of a month. And man, if you miss anything, they got plenty of time to think about it. They're like, you didn't tell us it was going to rain on Thursdays. It's like, no, I told you it's going to be. You got to deal with weather. You know, so I really over the top with it, because I think it's the first way to set up turnover. Is you bring somebody in, and yeah, it helped your recruiting because I polished it a little bit, made it look a little nice. But man, those people are going to leave, or they're going to be frustrated. They're going to be toxic. They're going to have bad things to say. So
Sometimes on the opposite side of that, being too specific, if you ask an employee to do something that's maybe not in that list, they say, hey, this isn't what I'm supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
So it is a fine middle ground that
yeah,
has to
for
be
sure.
found.
No, you're totally right. On my RV, I rent my RV, and it's older, and I try to be real descriptive about, hey, it's older, it'll break. But so I lose some renters who are probably like, dude, he's just saying things piece of junk. I'm like, no, I didn't say it's a piece of junk. I'm just saying it can break because it's 14 years old, you know. And so you run some people off, and you know, so there's definitely a balance there. So the whole idea of recruitment, you know, it's obviously going on. I know a lot of times when you do a job search, you feel like no one's recruiting you, and you're like, come on, man, can I get some love over here? But it is happening. In the trucking world, it was 100% turnover. So if I had 40 trucks, I had to hire 40 teams every year. Okay.
Every year.
Every year, 100% turnover, and that was a good company. Bad companies were 160% turnover.
Goodness.
So, so our recruitment, and then the challenge also from a recruiting standpoint, this people don't understand this about truck driving, but it's one of the tougher jobs to get because the screening is so difficult. So we would start with, we would basically convert about 2% of our applicants. Should say applicants, of our leads. So you would call me, and if I had 100 people call me, I'd end up with 2 people in a truck. Why? You know, they lose interest. I scare them off because my job description is too detailed, or they don't want to be. They didn't realize they had to be gone. You know, a lot of real reasons. But you screen a lot of them out also for background checks, drugs and alcohol, motor vehicle record, insurance stuff, work record. What a lot of people don't realize that, and now I'm getting a little bit on a soapbox to sell some respect for truck drivers, is they go through a lot more to get their job than a factory worker does for his. They gotta be a drug screen. They have to be able to verify the last 3 to 10 years. I'm talking verifiable work history. So that job you worked for under the table, and Johnny's gone, he won't verify you worked there, can't be a truck driver anymore. You know what I mean? So they go through a lot. So that's why we go from a funnel like this to results that. Okay. Think about some of the high-end technology jobs that are scrambling to get the youngest, latest, greatest, brightest minds. You know, they're trying to recruit hard to get those folks. So there's that kind of competing for the cream of the crop. Yeah.
I wonder if there's some like leeway with like the experience.
On truckers?
Yeah, because
Yes.
like, I got buddies straight out of high school that are already driving trucks.
Well, they aren't driving over the road. So what I'm talking about is interstate commerce.
Yeah.
So first of all, you gotta be 21 to drive that from across state lines. You can drive inside one
That's
state.
right. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
probably what they're doing.
Yeah, they're inside one state.
Yeah.
Those jobs much easier to get, a lot less regulated, still have some of the same regulations. Also, you in those smaller environments, you can get some mom and pops who are like, I don't care, just get in the truck, you know, and put you to work sort of
I
thing.
had a buddy, it took him almost a year to find a job that he could actually drive
Yeah,
internationally because there's just so much regulation. and
yeah,
stuff.
yeah, it's pretty serious. So you get much more than a couple speeding tickets on your license, they don't want you. You get more than one accident on your license, they don't want you. You know, and again, you think about a 21-year-old, like everybody's got speeding tickets at 21. You don't think about it, right? But so yeah. So here's a lot of different sources. Again, on the TV, I'm sure it's not coming through great. So these slides are out there on McGraw-Hill if you can check them out. But when you think of, you know, how, if you want to try to do some hiring, where are some ways you can go find employees?
Job fair.
Okay, so go to like a career fair sort of thing. What else?
Social media.
Okay.
Everyone's on social.
Okay, and just use internet in general as well, right? So all kinds of Career Builder, Monster.com, you know, all those.
Who you know?
Okay, that's a big one though, right, is a referral, right, so, so I was looking for somebody to guest speak in my Ivy Tech class. Okay, so I went out and asked some people I know, they were all busy, so I put it out on my Facebook page, hey, does anybody want to guest speak in my Ivy Tech class? Right, so you do the same thing, hey, we need to hire a bookkeeper. Donnie, you know a bookkeeper? No, I don't. Okay, yeah, kind of go around your department, and eventually you run out, and you go, well, let's ask somebody else, So those sort of referrals are big. Obviously, schools, so any sort of either trade school or college, you can go to those for employees. You can still run ads, in print media in that regard. Okay. The other source then is internally. And I'm a very, very big fan of promoting from within. I think it builds a really strong culture inside your organization. And I know the downside, I think we talked about this maybe 2 weeks ago, the downside of promoting from within is I have to fill 2 jobs instead of 1. But I always feel like if you call it a lower level job, is sometimes easier to fill than a higher level job. So if I'm taking someone from, say, an entry level job to maybe a middle manager, I feel like I got a lot greater candidate pool for my entry level job than I do for my middle manager.
Well, it also motivates the employees to actually
Yeah.
do their job, right?
Yeah, rewards them, creates loyalty, creates team synergy, cohesion. So those
Another
are,
process too.
What's that?
Yeah, another process. So I have a new supervisor who eventually I'll take over for. I'm coordinator. He knows nothing about the process. So basically, you have to put me in 2 places. She's like, "Hey Frank, how does this work?" All the guys are like, "Hey Frank, how does this work?"
yeah,
So I'm explaining it in both directions, north and south.
yeah.
So with somebody you promote through the system, they know the whole process, and you're more emphatic to your drivers or to your employees below you because you've
Been
took
there.
that initiative.
And you're respected too.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because you've been there, done that.
Absolutely.
You're willing to step back down. It sounds bad to step down, but you know what I'm saying. You're willing to get your hands dirty and go back a level if you need to.
And that right there holds a lot of weight with them too.
Oh, absolutely.
That old guy, he'll jump on that truck and he'll take off, and you're just like, absolutely. The lady that's there before, she was a boss. Go do that.
Yeah,
He's like, let's go. I'm with you guys. What do I do?
yeah.
It just,
It's huge.
it's, oh yeah, definitely,
Yeah.
definitely inspires you to,
Yeah,
you know what I mean? It's cool.
yeah. And that I'm teaching it's TLI 112. It's organizational behavior, and we spend a bunch of time on those sort of subjects. And we just were on power yesterday, and it's called expert power. Is when you know and have experience how to do something. But the other one is referent power, when you kind of admire somebody. And so those 2 power bases are really, really powerful for a supervisor or a leader, and that sort of thing. Selection. 2 different mindsets under selection, I think. One camp is we can screen them, test them, interview them, qualify them, and we can decide which one's the best. The other mindset is we can't do that. Either we don't have the time to do that, or we are inefficient at doing that, or it can't be done. So then that model is put them to work, put them all to work, and have a system for weeding them out. And so 2 different mindsets on that selection process. I see them both happen in the trucking business. I told you how screened they are. But man, and how you're losing a bunch of people, but because it's 100% turnover, there's some companies that go, we're just picking the wrong guys. So let's add even another layer of screening and double interviews and in-person interviews and personality tests, and that's gonna then get us to pick the right guy so our turnover goes down. Okay, I fell in the other camp, this after doing it for 13 years. I could tell you probably who's gonna be a bad hire, but I couldn't tell you who's gonna be a good hire. And so a lot of times they gotta be qualifications, they gotta be legal. And once they're legal, let's put them to work and let the system figure out who can make it, who can't make it. So.
I can't get over it's 100% turnover. I still couldn't imagine how it worked.
Yeah,
We're high, but 100%, that's high.
yeah, it is. Yeah, that's like I said, that's below the industry average. Okay, steps, we just ran right through all this. You pretty much have all these things. You might have some sort of probationary work period. Yeah, I don't feel like I'm a very good interviewer, interviewee, whatever. The interview process is tough. It's, you know, how much do I promote myself? How much don't I? You know, etc. Social media, you know, human resource people are starting to go out and look at your social media page. I don't know if you heard about the guy that got into it with Harden, the basketball player, and Harden got either teched or ejected, and then Harden got in trouble because he was, I'm gonna come whoop you and your wife. You
That
know,
was the
Westbrook, yeah, okay. And then everybody kind of was dogging Westbrook and, you know, thought he was horrible, and this guy was more of the victim of the whole deal, even though he'd been a heckler, he shouldn't be treated or threatened that way. And then everybody went to look at that guy's Facebook page and how much of a hater he was and et cetera, and the whole story just flipped. They took his Facebook page down right away, and I'd never said that, but of course copies were made, and so, Facebook page.
Get you every time.
Contingent workers, I know Subaru uses a lot of temporary workers. What do we like or don't like about contingent workers or part-time workers?
Well, they're easy to get rid of when they're a nuisance.
Okay,
I got one guy right now who just wants to talk back, be disruptive, and today when he comes in, he's going to the hardest job. Tomorrow when he comes in, he's going to the hardest job.
yeah,
You're not gonna be at the warehouse counter killing the culture of what we're trying to build.
good.
He's easy to get rid of without any sort of legal,
Mhm.
any sort of legal consequence though.
Yeah, good. What else? What else we like or don't like about them?
I guess for a temporary worker compared to a full-time worker, it's easier to get temporaries because you don't have to go through a more detailed process.
Okay.
A little bit easier.
A little faster,
Yeah, a little bit
a little more efficient hiring process.
Money too, I like the fact that you don't have to give them all the benefits.
Yeah.
And you pay them $3 under what they're starting out, and you find out who's a good worker who wants to be there.
Kind of goes back to that selection process too, right? If I can't quite figure out who's great, let me pay some guys, get some people started, but at this reduced rate with this ease of getting rid of, and start to figure out who's gonna make it and who's not. Yeah. One of the things I loved about temporary workers that I didn't realize until I was 5-6 years into my business was I didn't realize when I started building my business, I knew I really enjoyed hiring people, and I had a lot of compassion for their personal gain and them doing well, and I was enjoying that. But then when I had to like either lay someone off or fire someone, it really like bothered me. Or if I didn't think we were going to make payroll, or we were really tight or whatever, like I really stressed. But I found when I brought in a temporary worker, I didn't have any of that. Like I wasn't taking them to raise. You know what I mean? They were temporary, and if they had to go tomorrow, I didn't sweat it like I would with a full-time employee. So it gave me a little bit of peace of mind, you know. And I wonder if Subaru's doing that a little bit out there, not only the selection side, the benefits of temporary, but also I don't want to offend my full-time employees by laying them off. You know, I'd rather reduce my temporary staff.
I mean, they're there for a buffer. If we have to have a layoff, that's why there's certain quotas, a percentage of temporaries per team, per group, per
Yeah.
section, for that reason.
Yeah,
That's why I like it.
and I think that's valuable. I think that's a smart, I think they win both ways. They get a try it before you buy it selection process,
I feel like that's
and
why
yet they could create loyalty to their full-time employees by saying, hey, look, if we gotta have some trouble here, these guys are gonna back off first, you know?
I feel like it takes so long to get hired on at the temp because that time of possibility of having to lay people off. I feel
Yeah.
like that's part of
Which
it.
you guys never had a layoff here, have you?
There's been one, and that was just laying off,
Well, even when we was in that little
manpower.
depression, they had a strong economy, strong market here. They were I believe they were growing and growing and growing. They never stopped with what I've seen.
Yeah. We touched on peak in demand, saving benefits, we touched on all these, screening candidates, good. Intern or indentured servant, I think this isn't as popular as it used to be, man, you'd get an unpaid internship and they just crush you.
I did an unpaid internship.
Did they crush you?
Felt like it.
Yeah, so that, I don't think it's as prevalent as it used to be, but back in the day, man, you'd go to just, and they would just slave labor you, and you know, none of the good jobs, you know, they didn't really teach you anything. I think now businesses have a little bit more interest in trying to teach you something in your internship. But be aware of that, you know, when you get offered an internship, just be aware of that. Training and development. I'm a big training guy, but it just doesn't happen as much as I think it should. And I think a lot of that is because my theory on training is this: the leadership who decides whether we do more or less training oftentimes is so focused on the financial results, the short-term financial results of the business, that when they see the line item cost for training in their budget, in their profit loss statement, they go, we gotta cut that. Because if we cut that, we make that in profit. Meanwhile, if the training has been successful,
So much easier.
if the training has been successful, the business is doing better, there isn't a line item in the profit side that says, because we trained, we now have this. So I think it's a little short-sighted, and so people don't invest in training, and yet they wonder why their culture is what their culture is, or
It robs everybody that's making your money for you. So like, I've given the green light to train everybody. But I don't have enough hands on deck to say, all right, you're coming over here, you're gonna learn this today.
Yeah.
So I have to ask you to go up and beyond, get your line ahead, come over here, and I'm gonna train you on this.
Yeah.
How does it happen when we're completely overwhelmed and understaffed?
Yeah.
If they don't understand, if this guy's trained at Universal, I can say, hey, I need you to go pick this up and get this out there immediately. Okay, no problem.
Yeah.
Instead, I gotta break it down, explain the process, it takes 30 minutes longer. It would make
And
our
then-
life so much easier.
And not just that, but then that employee feels better, more valuable because he's been trained, you know, so, big opportunities both in the short term and the long term. Do you guys have thoughts on training or anything like that? How do you guys feel about the training they're putting you through, you know, here?
Well, now the temps, when I first got hired into CTA for the temporary service, because everybody mainly has to go through the temp service, not serve group. You got a week where you were doing half in like a room, just messing with bolts and stuff, and shooting guns and stuff, and then the other half you're going up and exercising and stuff, and then the next week they pretty much ship you out to the floor the whole time you're just training on the two jobs that they're starting you off with. Now, you go through a month class of sitting and just going through the paperwork and all this, I don't know what they.
Safety
exactly
stuff,
do.
whatever, yeah.
They go through a whole month's class of that now compared to what I did. So, I mean, I guess they're just trying to cut back the turnover, right? They're trying to get people to stay at Subaru instead of just, hey, here's your job,
Yeah.
do it, like.
Well, that, and I don't know, but the newer type of training might be cheaper as well. So now we can have more people in a class, less hands-on, but more people total for cost. You know, that might have been a consideration too.
There's a guy that just got hired on it. After the month class, they give you like a $400 bonus for going through and actually sticking through the whole class, and then after you work like another 2 weeks to a month, I'm not sure, during their probationary period, until they get done with the probationary period, they get another $400.
Yeah.
They're not doing it anymore. It was 4 weeks. Not 4 weeks, you're at $10 an hour. If you complete that 4 weeks, you get a $400 bonus, which would be equivalent to if you were at $14.25 per hour.
Sure.
So now they're not doing that anymore. They're going back to the 1 week class at $14.25 an hour.
Okay.
So, and
So, yeah, I didn't know that.
most of them are, to get full-time, you do have to go through the temporary process.
Sure.
You know, kind of go up that way till your number's called. But we're not constricted that way. We can say we're only gonna do full-time conversions, and all temporaries that are temporaries can stay that way. That's not good business practice, but I mean, we can hire however we want.
Sure.
Whenever we want, so,
Yeah.
but that is the majority, because it creates a greater expectation of how to become full-time. And when I came on, it was, you had 2 tests, and then you went out to the floor. So the focus on training, even though it's been reduced from 4 weeks to 1 week, it's still a greater focus on the fundamentals. So
Yeah.
I do think it's improved.
Yeah. Well, and to a certain extent, you can say that as a temp, you're still getting trained somewhat, because if I don't come up all the way up to speed, they can not call me back tomorrow, you know? So there's still that whole on-the-job training piece going on. Yeah, go ahead, Frank.
I'll say this, I know I've been talking a lot, I'll shut up.
No, that's
after this. So you're back to your original question, you asked how we feel in this training, and I'm extremely grateful for my company doing that. It took me to an average employee that was able to learn and grow, you know what I mean, I could do every job easily, to now I have direct communication with senior management.
Yeah.
You know, it's taken me from the even till, so this guy shows up every day, he's being watched, he knows what he's doing, it's set me up for success moving forward.
Well, I appreciate you saying that, because that's what I think is happening too, but I think the other thing that's interesting too, like even you mentioned earlier, it's taking you out of your comfort zone a little bit too.
Oh, yeah.
And you were at a spot probably where you could do most every job in that building,
Mhm.
and I was pretty good at it, I'm pretty comfortable, but I'm not necessarily advancing, you know, and so to advance, you gotta get taken out of your comfort zone a little bit.
Yeah.
And, so stand up doing presentations for some people, you know, David's in the Monday class, he hates doing presentations, you know, but he's gotta stand up and do a presentation.
David seems pretty chill, is that his name? He seems like a cool
No, it's
cat.
Donnie. Donnie don't like doing presentations either, but David hates them worse.
No, I don't mind them.
Yeah.
I had comm last semester, so I
Okay.
got a lot
He
better.
seems like a cool
Yeah.
cat.
I hate presentations.
Yeah, David's partners with Donnie in my other class, but David's in the Monday group. He was in your group in that Monday night, and
Mhm. Oh,
he
yeah.
doesn't like presentations. But so getting out of your comfort zone is valuable. You know, help you learn.
Well, and the audience helps you learn. Like, let's say even if you weren't uncomfortable doing presentations, it can depend on who's the audience too.
Yeah, oh,
that
yeah.
makes you.
Oh yeah, I remember. So when I was a freshman going in, I was a walk on at Butler, and the kind of a form of hazing that you had to do is you had to stand up in one of the big science giant lecture halls. You had to stand up on the lab table and sing your high school fight song, you know, and then of course get made fun of based on really your presentation skills, right? Because some people when they present, they get a habit of doing this, right? Or they're right, or whatever you're doing. The seniors are in the front row going, you know, if you're yeah. So it was good stuff. So I didn't even know my high school fight song, and they told me like 4 days ahead of time. I'm like, oh my god, mine's like I went to Highlands, so it was like this Irish, Scottish sort of, you know, so it's not a rah-rah thing, it's more of a tune. I struggled, man.
I feel like we always were singing our.
Yeah. Oh yeah, so then like the Butler fight song, won because we sang it every time we won, and we won all the time. I got it down, I can sing it right now, and but it's also a rah-rah, you know. My son goes to Wabash, worst fight song I've ever heard in my life. It ain't a fight song at all. It's like a sermon. It's like, what are you really even saying, and are you almost done? Like, it just goes on forever. So, anyway, yeah, so getting a chance up, stand in front, and present is good. Types of training, we've touched on a lot of these. Vestibule training, you know, they could try to get you into a lab. I mean, you guys are experienced with a lot of these. Management development, again, I'm a big leadership guy, and I think there's a real void in teaching leadership. I think for whatever reason, businesses just think you're gonna learn it on your own, or you're naturally a leader. I just think there's a lot more that can be done to teach effective leadership. I think we started with doing some management training, and I think that's different. I understand the value of me kind of controlling you and guaranteeing processes and quality, and those are important. But I think there's a lot of important aspects of leadership about me getting you excited, getting you loyal, getting you want to advance you and do the best you can. So I think there's a lot that can be done with there as well. Why good employees quit? No specific reason. I like that. But unhappy with management. That's kind of what I was talking. And not just quit. I think the hidden figure in there is underperform. I think there's a lot of disengagement. That if I get working for a bad boss, I may not quit. But I'm going to dial it back a little bit. I'm not going to kill myself today. You know, it's no different than like we're heading to March Madness, right? You're going to see some of the best basketball teams are going to win when all 5 guys would run through a wall for their coach, you know, and are just so energized and engaged. It's no different at work, you know. And so we have leaders and managers who aren't just doing the bare minimum of making sure the quality product is being produced, but are actually engaging and working with and developing the people that they're around. I think that number not only goes down, but it gets better.
That's what happened with my, I did an apprenticeship right as I got out of high school for pipe fitting, for
Uh-huh.
a fire sprinkler company. And it was, the main reason I quit, I only was there for 3 weeks because of management.
Yeah.
It was just, the person I was put with was just
Brutal.
so hard, it was
Yeah.
brutal.
Yeah, so and what about some of these others? You know, limited advancement, that's a big one. inadequate salary and benefits, I don't have a lot of patience for that one. I think people believe, and I include myself in this, believe they're worth more than they're actually worth in the market. So like when I got my MBA, I thought, man, all these doors are gonna open wide up for me and I'm gonna have this great job. Every job offer I got wasn't as good as the one I already had. You know, so I think we've gotta be very, very realistic about kind of where you're at, how employable you are, and, you know, that sort of thing.
And that's why this new age, kind of like paying for your education is so beneficial.
Yeah.
Especially for the young guys, they come in here 20, 25 years old, having a company pay for their bachelor's degree,
Yeah.
essentially no out-of-pocket expense.
Yeah,
That's a major come up.
absolutely, then we're gonna get into benefits a little later.
There's no contract either.
Yeah, see,
Yeah.
I have an 18-month contract.
Yeah.
I mean, which isn't terrible, but you guys
Yeah.
have the whole. I mean, I'm a little over 30, so I guess I'm not too far out of there. But
Yeah,
I wish I had my head on like they do right now at 20 years old. Well, already 19.
Yeah, 19.
yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, no, I get it. I think and I think that it goes to show the companies who are beginning to get the fact that we need to train our people,
mhm.
you know, so. Networking and mentors, I think we get that. Anybody a good networker in here? I'm not a very good networker. Anybody? Yeah. I'm not very good at like idle chatter. You know, like if I got something
hate
to say.
idle chatter.
Yeah.
I feel like it's not taking me anywhere. Why am I doing it? Like, I'm not wasting your time, not wasting my time.
Right, right.
But it's necessary.
It's
Yeah,
more of a
it's-
female thing, I think, and I'm not trying to like.
I know what you're saying.
But women can just talk
Oh, for
about
sure.
things like.
Oh, yeah.
It's just like, how do you talk about that? Like, where did that
Yeah.
come from? Like,
Yeah.
what is that? It's an
You talk
emotion or
about 4
feeling.
hours.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
The guys like
Yeah.
pounded up. Let's
Yeah.
go. Let's go to
Yeah.
the gym. Let's
Hey,
get out
done.
of here.
We're
I'd
done.
much rather cut it up about stuff that probably shouldn't be talked about at work.
Absolutely.
You know, just to kind of BS that way. Not so much like,
Well, thing for 2 hours.
Yeah.
About what?
Yeah.
Know anything and everything.
Yeah.
New
So
DIY
true.
catalog is popping.
I can say, yeah, I can say, man, the weather outside really sucks. Yeah, I know.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
going.
exactly.
And that's it.
Yeah,
That's all
see
we
ya.
do.
Yeah. Yeah, so performance appraisals, these can be tricky. You know, there's all different kinds. They're talking about the 360 review here. There's, 360 is kind of a new term, a new concept where now all of a sudden you're not just getting your performance appraisal done by your boss or even maybe a coworker, but they're actually calling like the customer you relate to or the vendor you relate to, getting their feedback. You know, so anybody that you come in contact with outside of the building, they're gonna get feedback from as well. I think those are fantastic, but you can imagine how much time those take, to do that and do them well. Traditionally, obviously, your boss sits down with you maybe once a year. That's a typical performance appraisal. But they have some problems. They're kind of a necessary evil, but they have some problems. There's kind of the 6 steps. I think we've been through them, but let's look at some of the problems. One of the things is, and I can tell you this is from doing performance appraisals myself and caring about them and trying to not even make these mistakes. Invariably, if you're only doing them once a year, you're really focusing on what they've done lately. And so if they happen to be on like a little bit of a downturn, which I totally think happens, I think over a 12-month period, we don't all operate at a flat line up here. We kind of ebb and flow, and people have good days and bad days. And so if they've happened to be on a little bit of a down tick, that's kind of what you begin to focus on. And even though they may have been a rock star earlier in the year, so I think that's a little bit of a downside. And then I think because again, management and leaders are not given a lot of training themselves, they can fumble through a performance appraisal and really make some people angry and not do it as well as they could possibly do it, and turn some people off, become a negative thing.
There's something on my mind that I'm pondering. Sorry, this doesn't really fit into here. So, my boss got promoted to senior management at work, right, over another department. They fired that senior manager because he couldn't do his job.
Uh-huh.
So she's over there implementing some new policy and procedure, kind of like, hey, that entire facility went to HR and reported her.
Yeah.
And just like, what do you guys want? The previous boss wasn't doing the job. The new boss steps in. It's kind of like, do you guys want to like govern yourself? Is
Yeah.
that what we're going for here? Like, we're going to ship this out today because we want to, but this is staying. It's just
Yeah.
not. It's just so much. Like
And
people
that's
are
change. Yeah, the people
difficult.
they want to battle change.
God.
And
She's
part
been good
of
to me too. Like I'm like, she's
Yeah.
giving me computers. She's taking me under her wing. It's like,
yeah. And so you wonder if in that scenario, if the old boss that got fired couldn't do his job because the coalition was so strong and so cliquey, you know, that he couldn't break through that, you know, and that now she's gonna break through that, and now she's feeling the repercussions of, you know,
Change.
yeah,
He didn't do his job.
upsetting the posse, you know what I mean?
He couldn't do his job because he was at Pete's Pub at 10 a.m.
Oh,
having a
okay.
beer, you know what
Yeah,
I mean? So
that's cool.
everybody was
Or
on the
maybe that's
clock.
how he did the job.
Maybe that's what it took to show up and hang with the posse,
Yeah.
all day, you know what I mean?
They said he'd come in, and then later on they see him and have a new haircut he didn't have when he came in. It's
Yeah.
like, hey, if you don't care, you don't care.
Okay, so, performance appraisals, again, it's kinda like you have to do something, but it's like we don't have it quite all figured out, the best way to do it. You know, you wanna include, you know, and so people have tried the bottom up, where you get at the lower level employee actually reviews the superior, that's not perfect either, you know, so, it can be tough. Again, this is kind of the reasons you have to have them, is you gotta start making some fair judgmental decisions on things like raises and promotions and advancement and who gets what. So, but here's some of the downsides, you know, some of the common problems. I hadn't seen this similar to me effect, but when we were talking about affirmative action and the challenges there, and I can tell you firsthand from when I was done with undergraduate, I was in graduate school. I went to work for this driver training center, and they had a very, very inspirational leader in their recruitment side. He was good, he was an MBA, and he was probably, you know, 35, 30-something, white male, former athlete, and I was, you know, 22, white male, former athlete. I walk in the building and they're all white male, former athletes, you know. So this whole similar to me effect is saying, I might be handing out promotions and advancement just because I get you, and I don't get this person, you know, and then the halo or horn effect, you know, she looks like my ex-wife, so there's no way I'm promoting her, right? That's the horn effect. Like
When
it
you do promote her.
Yeah, it depends on how you feel about it.
I got a shot.
So horn effect is when you just have something arbitrary and negative that you're associating with that person that they don't really earn. Halo's the opposite. Or I see this and I'm like, oh my God, the last time we hired the guy from Nigeria, he was awesome. Let's hire another guy from Nigeria. It's like, it doesn't really work that way, you know? Compensation programs, I'm gonna skip right to this slide here. Anybody have a preferred salary, hourly, piecework, commission, bonus, profit sharing? Let's leave profit sharing, gain sharing, and stock options off the table. Between bonus, commissions, piece, hour, and salary, anybody have a preference?
I'm salary and I like it.
Yeah, most people like salary, I think.
If you could solely put down what I did, I wouldn't mind peace.
Uh-huh.
I just wouldn't, you know what I mean? 'Cause
Yeah.
my dad was a construction worker for years. That's how I'm a big guy. I'm no stranger to moving some stuff, so
Yeah,
it wouldn't bother me. But it doesn't work like that in the
No.
factory. No.
they lose track of what you actually did.
Absolutely.
Yeah. That's why piecework is such a difficult way to pay people,
Mhm.
because a lot of times I gotta end up spending as much time tracking what you did as what you actually did. So it just doesn't work a lot. Commissions and bonuses. Anybody ever worked a 100% commission job? I have one if you know somebody wants to work in India, 100% commission job. I got a good one. I'll put somebody on, but some people don't like it. Some people are really scared of it.
What is it? Tell us more.
The job?
Yeah.
It's only part-time, you don't want it yet, but if you know somebody who wants to get into sales though, it's be a good gig, it'd be ground floor opportunity for a startup, business, so. Kind of those things where, as you bring stuff in, you know, we'll make sure you get paid. Bonuses can be really tough, I've had really bad experience with bonuses, so much so that I went away from them completely. Bonuses, I think become really tricky because one of the first mistakes are people begin to expect them.
Mm-hmm.
And so now all of a sudden, is it really a bonus or is it just part of my pay? Because if you're expecting it, it's I always joke with the Christmas vacation where he was going to put the pool in, right? And they got the Jelly of the Month Club. You guys remember Christmas vacation or not? But he didn't get his bonus, and he was ready to build a pool. That stuff happens all the time. So that's one thing I don't like about a bonus. Second thing I don't like about a bonus is a lot of times the person's being bonused on something that they don't have 100% control over. And so it can end up demotivating them and frustrating them because they're like, well, yes, I'm doing my 1/3 here, but this is happening over here that's gonna take my bonus away. And I can't do anything about that. It's frustrating, you know? Same with profit sharing. You know, there's so many decisions just from an accounting standpoint, like in my trucking business, how we decided to depreciate the trucks changed whether we were profitable or not profitable. And none of my drivers, none of my people had a say in how we decided to do that. It was just me and the owners. So now, so we're not profitable, they don't get any profit sharing, they're frustrated because you promised that to them. So you just gotta be really, really careful. It's really, really slippery slope. Stock options can be good. A lot of times they just go to the executives though, and they can be a little bit of a demotivator as well. Let's get into these fringe benefits. I love fringe benefits. Let's go right here. So when we hear benefits, we almost all think of like, you know, medical, dental, you know, that sort of thing, and those are important. And the more attractive your medical and dental can be, the better, you know, at both retaining and attracting talent. But in a small business in particular, there's just a lot of small little benefits that you can do that are pretty rewarding, I think. You know, and so whether it be you know, helping them with childcare costs, you know, or maybe giving them a cell phone instead of having to have their own cell phone. You know, there's just a lot of small things you can do. Legal counseling, a lot of small places will basically pay a law service for you to do your will or to do whatever, you know. There's a lot of neat things out there you can do. Some of the, obviously the big time companies are doing some crazy stuff with nap pods, and I need a nap pod. I mean, I have it, it's called my car, but it'd be nice to have the nap pod in here so I don't have to walk all the way out there, but, you know, doing all kinds of, you know, free breakfast, massages, you know, meditation, you know, classes. I mean, the big time companies are doing some really, really crazy things. I always ask like a question for the table sort of thing when you're hanging around is, if you could hire, like, if you could be paid a service at your house, like, you know, someone's always gonna do all my landscaping and my mowing, or someone's always gonna fold and put away laundry, or someone's gonna give me a massage, or someone's gonna cook for me, you know, what service, if you could just have it paid for the rest of your life, would you be like, I want that?
Laundry and massage.
You can't know one. Budget's only one.
Dishes.
Dishes?
Dishes.
Oh, see, I'll do dishes all day long.
No,
I don't mind dishes.
I don't mind dishes at
If
all.
I'm paying for it,
My dishes.
You're not paying for it, it's
I'm
free.
not paying for it,
It's free,
I'm gonna probably go to the massage route.
yeah.
By the time I get to those dishes, some of it to be thrown away.
Yeah.
You throw 'em in the
You know how
sink,
many
turn hot
Rubbermaid
water,
containers I throw
all that
away?
other
At least
stuff,
one a
yeah.
week.
Well, so I don't know if you guys buy lunch meat, but I buy those Hillshire Farms that are in the Tupperware, and those are my Tupperware then.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
That's what I do.
So, massage, Don, what are you going? I'm right between chef and massage. I love to cook, but man, it would be cool to have it all prepared already ahead of time
I
and,
do
you know,
chef because I have a lot of stuff going on, and just be able to do.
food, and then it could probably be healthier, you know, because a lot of what I'm cooking is,
I go out and eat
yeah,
every day.
yeah.
What's-
Yeah, you're younger though.
What's for lunch today? Pizza? Oh, that's
Chipotle.
pizza? Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. We just talked about changes and some of the challenges. Flex time, anybody have worked a job that was like flex time where you could leave and, you know, you had to maybe be there core hours, you know? Pretty common, a little bit more on the, you know, white collar side where they'll say, hey, look, we need you here from 1 to 3, but beyond that, you can make any hours you want for the rest of your work. Or you can work remotely. All my stuff is remote. I mean, I'm sitting at my little kitchen table some days and never talk to a human being, you know, and working all day. So, I have a lot of jobs that don't pay me anything. I do a lot of these nonprofit jobs I love, I'm passionate about. I'll be sitting at my computer cranking all day.
It's a spiritual reward.
And I get up and I'll be like, dude, I didn't make $1 today. So, job sharing, it doesn't happen a lot, but you're bringing 2 part-time people together to accomplish a full-time job. core time was touched on, you know, where they kinda gotta be there for during a core time, and that's it. Compressed work weeks, you know, nursing, I got a picture of nurse, I think that, like if I was advising my daughter or whatever, it's like, man, a nurse is not, if you can do all the medical and deal with all the stuff, I wouldn't wanna do that, but from a employability standpoint, they need nurses everywhere, so you can go anywhere in the world you wanna go, and you can work kind of a 4-day work, long week, and now you got 3 days off, and, you know,
That's what I'm gonna try to push my daughter to be.
yeah.
I've hung out with a few that have like $49 an hour because
Yeah.
they're over
Yeah.
oversee a shift,
Yeah,
like big money. Like
yep. Home-based work was touched on.
if you find a nurse, grab onto her.
Not physically,
Yeah.
just emotionally.
Yeah, they get emotional attachment, I think.
Yeah.
My girlfriend's going for it, and she's like, well, I don't know if I can pay for it. I'll pay for your school.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's when she needs you for a
Maybe you should
doctor.
say reimbursement.
Yeah, that's when she leaves you for a doctor.
Yeah, that, and
Doctor.
my brother's gal, was a nurse a long time, and then she just went back and got her like nurse practitioners or physician's assistant, they're kinda the same thing. But she's supposed to graduate in May, you know, so that's a whole nother jump in pay,
Mhm.
you know.
Just make sure you write it down on contract. She can't leave you.
Moving, let's talk about terminated employees. I think it's one of those things that again, we talk about the lack of training for management leadership. I think if your company's big enough to have an HR department, they obviously know how to do it, and they've been trained, and they have enough training. But when you're small, and maybe your supervisor is like, you know, the one that's gonna have to let you go, I have found it's very difficult, but also very important to remove some of your personal anger out of the situation for the termination event. So like you using your guy who's talking all the time, and let's say you end up having to terminate him. And I know it's a little different because he's a temporary, and that makes it a little easier. But you've been frustrated with the guy. Maybe it's weeks, maybe it's months, maybe it's years, and that's been building up. And the tendency is to want to display this to the person who you're terminating because you want to show them why you're terminating them. You know what I mean? And what I have experienced is the better way to do it is to display some of that well ahead of time and let them know that if these things don't correct, it's gonna lead to your termination. But in the termination event, the actual conversation, I think it's much better to try to remove that. If you have to discuss the facts, but usually you don't have to do that. We've made a decision, and you're no longer in the best interest of the company, we don't need you to come in tomorrow. And they're gonna be hurt or angry or whatever, and I think it's actually valuable to empathize with that a little bit. And be like, yeah, I hear what you're saying.
Well, sometimes I don't think it's just frustration, like anger. Sometimes I think it's just disappointment. You know, you got a guy that's not performing well, and he's homeless, and he's just not getting it. You gotta let him go. Sometimes it can be,
Oh, for sure.
you know,
Or
sucks
they
to
make,
feel.
or they make a true accident,
Yeah.
and you gotta let them go
just
for
do
the accident, but it was like, you know, it was an accident, like they didn't intentionally do something wrong, and you're like,
And to justify my anger is all I'm gonna do here. Is he's got into it with every individual, every.
has anyone said
super-
anything to him though?
Yeah, sure, but my supervisor is kind of like, doesn't have much of a backbone, which I'm kind of shocked. He did like 15 years in the military. He was super high up.
Yeah.
Makes a ton of money. It's like he just doing this. He doesn't need the money. He told
Yeah.
me he does like 60,000 a year. He makes in pensions and other things. But it's like, man, you gotta kick him in the ass sometimes. Let's go. You know what
Well, I
mean?
think the biggest thing I'd really try to go with that is very helpful is the whole 3-strike rule. You know, 3 strikes in baseball, you're out. You know, I'd already be at strike 2 with that person right away. And what I mean by strike 2 is that means I've had documented, whether I've sent them an email or in your case, a face-to-face, and said, here's the behavior, and here's what needs to stop.
Yeah.
And you do that 2 times, and the 3rd time, you're out. Because here's what it'll help you do, is it'll help you sleep at night.
Yeah. He's on that
Because-
turmoil right now. I don't know. I don't want him to lose his job because he does kind of know a little bit.
But if you
he's
don't
not-
get after him, and you don't correct his behavior, and now you fire him, is it his fault, or is it the supervisor's fault? You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's.
And what you wanna know for sure is it ain't my fault.
Yeah.
And
It's
so,
not an easy thing as we're actually getting into it, like the leadership roles. It's not as easy as it sounds. It's all easy on the test.
absolutely,
Like, and then you brought it up, we're like, well, in the leadership roles, they have more time, they have less time, but they want more out of you. You're everywhere, and it's just like
you're exactly right.
it's
That is the
almost
reality.
impossible.
And what I'm saying is that you care about this person, this employee.
Yeah.
So now I gotta find time. I gotta carve time out of my schedule to go tell this guy he ain't doing his job. Why? Because if the roles were reversed, I want someone to come tell me I wasn't doing my job.
But I would correct it because I've had issues, and I've like, hey, you're too aggressive. Like, you can do your job, but you can't come in here cussing people out at 6 a.m.
Right.
Well, 6 a.m. isn't my best moment of the day. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, no
Yeah.
one likes to be talked
But
to.
someone told you that. You know what I
Exactly.
mean?
So we corrected it.
Yeah.
That's like how many.
But you gotta tell the guy, and sometimes literally sitting down and he don't even know what you're writing down, and you're like, got the date here, and he's going, she's writing some shit down. You can be coloring poodle, you know, you don't know that, but it just adds the severity to it.
Yeah.
And so that, again, when you get to that third strike, you're like, bro, now no one's upset. We talked about it, it's done, and you get your stuff, you're going, you know?
We just let go of a girl like 6 months ago because her attitude too, but what set it off, she ended up throwing a box full of parts over in cardboard at a chick and hit her in the head for materials.
Yeah.
If you're a hell of a worker, you can say whatever you want. I don't care.
You ain't throwing boxes at people.
Yeah, don't throw
brother.
boxes at people. But if you're
You
a
ain't
worker,
throwing boxes.
if you're a worker though, go. If you're mad, you're angry all the time, but you're getting everything done, I like it. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? But you can't come up here just being subpar and talking crazy. It's just.
Everybody was telling her she's not getting let go, and the next day she's like, oh, I'm not worried about it, and then Mark came over, she started bawling. And
Oh,
everything.
yeah. Everybody's tough guy till they're in the room.
Hey,
Violence is not accepted.
and no one has friends till they're in that room. Hey, he did it, he does this.
Yeah.
There's no loyalty.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Throw him under the bus, get him fired first, walk him outside.
Oh, yeah.
You guys friends?
Yeah, that's serious stuff. All right, we're gonna take a break here so you guys can check your phones and whatever, and